Hello everyone, we're going to get started here in just a little bit. We're going to wait till we get a few more people on here. But today we're going to be with Mac up here in the forge, and she's going to be giving us a demo here. She's going to be making some hooks. But this is our campus here at Touchstone. Down here we have the small metal studio. Up here we have the Hart Moore Blacksmithing Museum. And then over here we have our forge. It's a very large building. We have 12 student forges and 1 instructor forge. We've got a beautiful view tonight. If you guys don't know who we are, Touchstone is a residential craft school out in Pennsylvania. We're up in the Laurel Highlands. It's a beautiful area. We encourage you guys to come out and take a class. We have workshops typically during the summer that run about 5 days long, or we also have some weekend workshops. Now we'll come into the studio here. We've got Mac working at her forge.
Hello.
Mac is a metalsmith, a blacksmith from Washington State, and she's here for her second year at Touchstone as one of our interns. Mac, would you like to introduce yourself and talk to us about what you'll be doing tonight?
Sure. Yeah. Like Stacey said, my name's Mac. I'm really excited to be back here for a second season, and I am going to be demoing some processes that I'm still playing around with. I've been designing a couple different types of latches for a garden gate specifically, but it could be any type of swinging gate really. So I'm going to start off by doing what is kind of an experiment for me as well, which I'm excited about. I think it's going to work just great. So you can show over here, Stacey. Over the last couple days, on and off, I've been playing around with the design for a gate latch that looks kind of like a ribbon. So I've been playing with different dimensions of steel and looking at like which designs, which sizes of material look the most kind of organic or ribbon-like. And some of them I've been designing so that they can lock as well. And the latch I'm going to show you today is designed so that you can put a padlock through it when it's shut if you need to. So here they are. This one, once it's finished, it still needs some fine-tuning. It needs the handle put on, the bolt latch here, and some other little fussing, as well as the holes where you can mount it to the gate. This one is going to go to my folks' garden in Washington State. But this is the one I'm going to show you today. So I have one side of the latch mostly assembled here, and what I'll be attaching now is the handle part that you actually touch that lets you slide this back and forth. And it is open so that you can put a padlock through this space. And then after that, I'll show you a little bit of the bending process that I've been using for the ribbon pieces. This will be the receiving side of the gate, so it will be mounted on the opposite post, and I'm just going to forge the ribbon tip end and then play around with it a little bit on a stump over here to show you a way to get really soft bends without marring up the surface of the metal with the metal hammer. So first off, we will just try this experiment together. This is the handle piece that I've assembled. I decided I didn't want to rivet a piece through the latch, partially because, I mean, rivets are beautiful, but I'm trying to challenge myself to do different things. This also allows me to attach this once this is already inside without having to secure this in a way that I can pound on it to make that rivet head, which would be doable, but it's been fun to work around it. So what I'll be doing is putting this into the vise, and then this piece will be going into the back here through this hole while hot, and then I'll be spinning it so that it then is attached in to that piece. So I'm going to heat this little sucker up and get this guy into position here. farther past where I want it to bend, which will be right around here. Now what I'm going to be using to turn this part is this little wrench here. So I'm just going to fit it on here, make sure it's good and snug. So that will let me spin this while I hold the other piece. Alright, we're just about there. Just going to set that in a little bit longer. So I'm remembering to put this in through the back so that when I spin it, the front side that I've forged is the one that faces outwards. Always double checking. Alright, I'm just going to brush this guy off a little bit here. We've got a little bit dumpy in there. So I'm just going to tap that off. That's what I get for talking to you while having a tiny little piece in the fire. I think that it's still going to be just fine.
If anyone has any questions about the process or what she's doing, feel free to send a comment in the chat and I can forward her that question.
Oh, looks like my little tab might be too short here. And that is okay. Come back up again. I'm going to forge them out a little bit longer. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to stick out the other side. Trying to baby this guy a little bit so I don't get it too hot in there. Gently tap that little thing out. Into a square very, very briefly, and now I'm just rounding it back out again, really lightly. Okay, so let's go take a peek over here and see if that looks like it's going to be more secure. Yeah, that looks good to me. So it comes out the other side, but I think that when it bends, that's going to pull a little bit, and the other side should sit flush. But we'll see. This might not be the design that I go with. I might have to figure out a different way, but we'll do that tomorrow.
We do have a question. Someone wants to know what's your favorite hammer style? Rounding hammer, crossbeam, etc.
I like Swedish hammers, like visually and kind of like weight or like experientially, but it depends on what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm still kind of getting a feel for that, but I think one of the beautiful things about tools in general is that you can have multiple favorites because different tools are more appropriate for different tasks. So, and I always like to play favorites. Yeah, I am really happy to be using the first hammer that my mentor, Lair Wells from Seattle, the first hammer that she ever forged. So I'm using that one right now as well, which is super fun. Okay, let's try this again. move this little guy out of the way a little bit, and okay. Let's see. So that guy is definitely attached, but it's not sitting exactly where I want it to sit. So I ended up putting this whole piece back in the fire just to adjust it, or grab the torch and kind of wiggle that guy around. Yeah, I think that's where it's going to be. So I'll let this cool down and show you a different process, and then we'll talk more about some of the ways to get this to sit in exactly the position that I'm looking for and have a little bit less of a wiggle. But overall, I feel pretty good about it. I feel like it's something that I can do again a little more smoothly, and I don't hate how it looks. So. Okay, so there we have it. See that the handle is attached now. What I would like to do is just forge it out a little bit more here. If I heat it with a torch, just in that more localized space, it won't affect the areas around it. And so I can really just tap that down and get this piece to sit snug on the other side of the bolt here. But overall, I think it's looking pretty good. And then this is the area I mentioned earlier that because the handle is a loop, you can put a padlock through this piece to lock your gate if you need to. So that'll be, yeah, this will need to be just tightened up a little bit so that when you move your bolt, your handle doesn't have such a wiggle to it. That is totally doable. I'm going to set this down here to cool. So this is the other side. You can see some of the other designs that I play with for the receiving sides of the gates. I'm kind of leaning towards the longer ribbon with the single loop, although I may remake this one for this particular latch. So as you can see right here in the mouth of the tongs, I've already forged this end to look like a ribbon that's been cut at an angle, so I'm just going to give you a little example of doing that on the other side. So that's just going to take a minute to heat up. Do we have any other questions so far?
Does anyone have any other questions? How long have you been doing blacksmithing?
That's a good question and kind of a tricky question because it took me a while to get it together to pursue it more seriously. So the first lessons that I took were in the end of 2013, I think, 2014. And then I took a concentration at Penland in 2015 in the spring that helped like solidify my interest. And it wasn't until over a year and a half after that I ended up moving to Seattle to work with Alaire Wells at the end of 2016. So since then, the long-ish answer. Sketch my palms here. Still fairly delicate because of how thin the steel is, but I'm going to switch over to this bigger hammer anyway.
What's your favorite part of the process?
Sometimes it's whichever one I'm currently doing. Just how I feel about a lot of things. It's super hot. I'm not going to talk in torch, but I'll probably lose my place in this anyway. So what I'm doing when I turn this is each time I hit it from this side, it's getting thicker in one direction, and I don't want it to fold over on itself and get any little like lips, because if you get little pieces that pull out of whack, they can cause cracks in your work later. And now it's getting pretty cold, so I'm just going to pop it back in there. Be patient with it. My favorite part. I really like using fine, delicate work or delicate stock and like twisting and bending, which is part of what has drawn me to this like ribbon design. It was fun to use this size, but I don't like weight wise. I don't think it's very suited to the size of latch that I'm wanting to make, and putting fasteners in something this small is not great. But it's really fun to I'm trying to use steel as though it's kind of a textile. I do a number of different knotted designs in some of my work. I'm playing with figure 8 knots, half hitches, and different bows sometimes, which are fun. Yeah, so I enjoy playing with a material in a way that convinces it to behave a little bit like a different material. And one thing that is also my favorite is forging with other people. It's really, there's so much that you can do as a team, and it's pretty magical to work together to make something. Just even that out a little bit. So now I'm just cleaning it very, very lightly because it's so cold. I'm just kind of cleaning up the surface. A little bit fussy. But now you can see we have a shape that mirrors the shape on the other end here. Right. So now, while I've still got some heat on this side, I'm just gonna pop this guy back in the forge, and we will look at doing some bending over the stump and the rawhide hammer. So it's going to get a little bit smoky, but using those two things together is just a great way to get really almost liquid kind of flowy bends with no marks from your hammer. Okay. So I'm setting the coiled piece in that other pocket so that I'm not banging on it too much. And then I just really gently hit that over this bowl. If I use this side of the hammer, it's going to give me an even rounder result, even more round result. I'm just going to tap it over this deeper bowl for a second. Loosen it. I'm just going to get this a really gentle bop. So I'm going to do that one more time because I can see that the bend is soft, but it's not consistent. There's a little bit of a flat spot in the center. So I think that when I bring it back over this hole that's a little bit deeper with this rounded end of the hammer that's complementary, that should bring that right out of there and give it a really nice even curve. It's very hot here. I'm grateful that today is not as hot because it is always hot in front of the board, which is fine, but it's been like 90 degrees outside, so happy for a rainy day today. That's my small talk about the weather. Okay, so this is kind of a light orange, and that might be enough heat because I'm not really asking it to move very far, but I'm just going to be on the safe side. go. I feel better about that. And then just bring this over here. Put a little counter band here. So now, is that a good angle to see?
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it just has a little wave action. And so what I would do to finish this out is play around with putting a complementary bend right about here so that I have enough space on this part of the strap to put a hole for a fastener and to make sure that this eventually lays flush against the surface. Like you can see that while I set it here on this flatter spot, it's a little crooked, and ultimately I will ensure that at least 1.5 inches or so on either side of the coil sits completely flush with whatever it's sitting on, so that it will sit against what you're fastening it to on the gate. And I played around with some different designs where instead of having the fastener like equidistant from the center on either side, looking at having the ribbon curve around and then it meeting the board again closer to the end and having like one fastener here or maybe both farther away. But this part still needs to be in the center, completely flush with the board so that the pin from the other side moves directly through that channel. Because if it was sitting out like this, I would just miss it entirely.
We do have a question. Someone's wondering what the advantage is of using the stump over the anvil.
Oh, in this case, it's because the stump is softer, and so the impact of the surface when I'm making that bend in the metal is much less likely, almost impossible to it's not going to create a mark on the surface of the metal. And when you're forging, often it is quite possible to forge out any marring marks by forging evenly and consistently with proper heat. But in this case, it is just a very efficient way to get the organic shape that I'm looking for. And the stump, this stump in particular, is a sinking stump, so it has these divots that have already been carved out of it. You can see like this one is more of an oval, and that's great for a spoon. And so it gives me that negative space underneath the flat surface. So here's a bar that is cold. And so if I were to forge this on the anvil, I certainly could hold it over the edge and start to bend it. You can hold it over the horn and bend it there on that rounded surface. But in this space, especially with the rounded side of this hammer that is also quite soft, it is just a very efficient way to get a nice organic bend with no marring of the surface. Any other questions?
Feel free to mention it if you have questions in the comments, and we can pass those on to Mac.
So this is cool enough to touch now. And I don't have the torch set up, and I'm not going to make you all sit through that. So what I'll be doing is heating up just this little area to make this bend nest behind here and to get it so that there's no wiggle left at all. And then eventually you will no longer be able to see the hole that passes through the pin. And then this will come further around so it will sit closer to the gate in this area, a little bit more flush, and then it will be a stable bolt latch for a gate. And let's see, because that one is still hot and being forged, I'm not going to put that here, but it would be something similar to this. This is a different size of material, but so if you had, not to over explain how a gate works to all of you, but say these are the boards that make up your gate. Well, ideally wider than that. You have one here and one here. Your gate is shut. You shut your gate, put your latch over here, and there you go. And then you pop a padlock through there, super shut.
Awesome.
And that is gate locking 101.
We do have another question.
Sure.
How does the Touchstone Blacksmith Studio compare to other places where you've worked?
it's great, first off. It's also kind of apples and oranges. I have not worked in a space that was built specifically to be a teaching space for a class of this size. That's something that's really special about this area. Aside from Penland, which I guess I was a student at, so I don't consider it work, but so the closest that I have to compare it to would be Penland Shop. Stacey would give a little pan of the space. We have 12 fully equipped full forges. We have 2 power hammers, a pneumatic hammer as well as a mechanical hammer, and tons of equipment that I'm not going to go into right now. But we do have 2 different campus tours, I believe, posted on YouTube by now, and maybe on Facebook and or Instagram as well. So they're great, and the other shops that I've worked in have been great as well in their own ways. They've just been for very, very different purposes. So it looks different when you have like a single artist or a group of craftspeople working and doing architectural work versus a teaching space that can teach up to 12 people at once. Any other questions?
Do you make tools?
Sometimes. My chasing tools are in the small metal studio. This winter I made a set of 40 different tool chasing and repoussé tools for sheet metal. I'm mostly going to be using copper, some of which I've been playing around with here. And then actually if you come back over to the table, so sometimes I will make tools that are very meticulously made for a very specific purpose with certain types of high carbon steel, and that are then heat treated, hardened, and then tempered in very specific ways depending on what they're being used for. And then other times when I'm playing around with making a ribbony gate latch, I will look at, I will make little jigs out of just mild steel. So this I believe I used for this smaller guy here. And I played around with some bigger designs. I would put this in the vise and use it to bend the steel around to get the frame of the shape and also to keep these 2 consistent, which is the most important part besides having the back flat, is having those 2 pieces remain in the same plane. Otherwise the pin's not going to slide through them. So ultimately I've ended up pretty much settling on the dimensions of this little jig, which technically is a tool that I did make. It's just made out of mild steel and not doesn't need to be hardened or tempered. And yeah, it's for a very specific purpose.
Do you have personal tools that you bring with you?
I do have some. Yeah, I'm working on making tongs for myself because I just don't have that many sets of tongs. I have these beautiful little gentle scrolling tongs made for me by Anna Koplik. They're delightful. And then like I mentioned earlier, I have the hammer that was the first hammer that my mentor Alaire ever made. And then I have just a whole box of a number of different tools. I'm currently working on, if you look over here, making one of these, which is called a guillotine. So this is the tool that I have sampled the design from here, and then I drew up a CAD program and sent it to a friend of mine who runs a plasma studio, and then he cut these pieces out for me and sent them back. And so I'll be assembling them into my very own guillotine that I can take with me everywhere. This is a really great tool to use when you are not able to work with other people, because you can put your steel through the center here. Can you see that, Stacey? You place this in a vise or in the hardy hole of the anvil, put the steel through the center, use different shapes of dies depending on what result you're looking for, and then you hammer on the top here, and there you have it. So it's a super versatile and really useful tool, and I'm excited to make a series of dies that have different shapes to affect the metal in different ways. So the short answer is yes, I have some of my own tools, and I'm currently working on making many more of them.
Are all the forges here at Touchstone coal firing?
12 main forges are, as well as the 13th, which is the instructor forge, and then we have 4 gas forges. We have 2 Whisper Mamas that are double burners, and one of them, I'm gonna look at it over here, safety, it's over here. And then we have 2 homemade gas forges that are made out of pipe that are much larger, longer, cylindrical. So this is not attached to the tank right now. This was just actually given to us in a donation last season. So this is one of the gas forges. We'll mostly use this for demonstrations off-site, but we have had different classes. Like we had a Damascus making workshop last summer with Andrew Mears, and we used the larger 2 gas furnaces in that class quite a bit. Any other questions about the shop, or?
None so far.
Great.
Are we done?
Okay, I mean, that's all I have planned.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mac, for showing us around the studio and giving us a little demo. That was great.
You're welcome. Thanks for all your questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, there's I think 2 full tours of this studio of small metals, glass, and ceramics that we did this weekend last week that are also online if you want to see more about the specifics of like equipment that we have in the different spaces.
Yeah, and feel free to check out online at Touchstone's website at touchstonecrafts.org. We have all of our virtual programming online, and that's posted on there. We do a lot of our virtual programming through Zoom as well as Facebook Live, so please check that out, and you can find some more demonstrations and presentations going on. We also have our next Intern Artist Talk next week at Tuesday at 7 p.m. again, and that'll be with Elle Newmeyer in the Glass Studio. So feel free to tune in here next week on Instagram Live for that demo, and then check out some other demos and presentations that we have, and those are all going to be on our website. Thank you guys for tuning in.